The space station called Kepler floated in the darkness between the stars. It was huge, bigger than most cities back on Earth. Lights blinked along its metal walls like stars. Inside, the Galactic Combat Training Institute trained the best young fighters from dozens of different alien worlds. The main training hall buzzed with activity. Young aliens from many species practiced fighting moves and studied war tactics together. Some looked almost human, but had blue or green skin. Others had extra arms, strange eyes, or bodies covered in scales. They all wore the same gray uniforms with colored badges showing what planet they came from. Near the fighting rings, a group of tall, scary aliens stood together. These were Krillians. They looked like giant lizards walking on two legs. Sharp bone spikes grew from their arms and shoulders. Their skin was thick like armor. Each one stood over 7 feet tall and weighed as much as 3 humans. The biggest Krillian was named Thexral. He had more scars than the others and his bone spikes were longer. His yellow eyes always looked for someone weaker to hurt. Today, he watched a small blue alien trying to practice sword moves alone. The small alien was named Zeppelin. He came from a peaceful world called Althar. His people had never known war until space travel brought them into contact with more violent races. Zeppelin was barely 5 feet tall. His blue skin was see-through, showing the veins underneath. He had joined the academy to help protect his home world, but he was learning that good intentions meant nothing here. "Look at the little fish trying to be a warrior," Thexral said to his friends. His voice was deep and rough like grinding rocks. The other Krillians laughed, showing rows of sharp teeth. Zeppelin heard them but kept practicing. He moved the training sword in careful patterns, the way his instructor had shown him. Sweat made his blue skin shine under the bright lights. "Hey, fish boy," Thexral called out. "Come here. I want to show you something." Zeppelin stopped practicing. He knew what was coming. It happened every few days. The Krillians would find some excuse to hurt him during training. The academy instructors always said it was good for him. They said pain made weak species stronger. "I am busy practicing," Zeppelin said quietly. He did not look up from his sword. Thexral walked over, his heavy feet making the metal floor shake. "I said come here, little fish. Or do I need to come get you?" The other aliens in the training hall stopped what they were doing. Some looked worried for Zeppelin. Others pretended not to see what was happening. Everyone knew the Krillians were the strongest species in the academy. Everyone knew the instructors liked them best. Instructor Vorthok stood nearby, watching everything. He was an older Krillian, with gray scales and many battle scars. He had taught at the academy for 20 years. His job was to make sure training went smoothly, but he never stopped the Krillians from picking on weaker students. He thought it was natural. Strong species should rule over weak ones. "Problem here, Cadet Thexral?" Instructor Vorthok asked. But his tone showed he did not really care. "No problem, sir," Thexral said with a nasty smile. "Just helping this Althari understand proper fighting stance. His form is very bad." Zephelin's hands tightened on his practice sword. He knew he could not win a fight against Thexral. But he also knew that running away would only make things worse tomorrow. "My form is fine," Zephelin said, trying to keep his voice steady. Thexral laughed. "Show me then, little fish. Attack me." The training hall went completely quiet. Even aliens who had been practicing on the other side of the room stopped to watch. Everyone knew this was not really about sword forms. This was about power. This was about showing who was on top. Zephelin raised his practice sword. It was made of soft metal that would not cut skin, but it could still hurt if swung hard enough. He took the fighting stance his instructor had taught him. His feet were apart for balance. His sword was ready to strike or block. "Very good," Thexral said in a mocking voice. "Now attack." Zephelin moved forward carefully. He tried a simple thrust toward Thexral's chest. The big Krillian knocked the sword aside easily with one arm. Then his other hand shot out and grabbed Zephelin by the throat. Thexral lifted the small alien off the ground with one hand. Zephelin's feet kicked in the air as he struggled to breathe. His blue skin turned darker as blood could not flow properly. "Lesson 1, Thexral said loudly so everyone could hear. "Speed means nothing if you have no power behind it." He threw Zephelin across the room. The small alien hit a wall and fell to the floor, gasping for air. His practice sword clattered away across the metal floor. Other students watched in silence. Some of the gentler species looked upset, but they said nothing. They had learned that speaking up only made you the next target. Instructor Vorthok nodded his approval. Good demonstration. Cadet Thexral. Cadet Zeflin. Work on building more strength before your next combat session. Zeflin slowly got to his feet. His throat was sore, and his back ached from hitting the wall. But his eyes showed no surrender. He picked up his practice sword and went back to where he had been training. Stubborn little fish, Thexral muttered. But there was something like respect in his voice. Most aliens gave up after the first beating. This one kept coming back. As the training session ended, aliens filed out of the hall to go to their next classes. Zeflin was always the last to leave. He stayed to practice more, trying to get stronger, trying to get faster. He knew he could not match the Krillians for raw power, but maybe he could find another way. What he did not know was that someone had been watching the academy very carefully. Someone had seen the reports of training accidents that looked like beatings. Someone had noticed how many students from peaceful species were quitting or disappearing. Far away on a Terran Federation ship, a woman finished reading the latest incident reports from Kepler Station. She closed the file and reached for her travel bag. It was time to pay the academy a visit. 3 weeks passed, and things got worse at the academy. Thexral and his group of Krillian friends grew bolder each day. They had learned that the instructors would not stop them as long as they called it training. The Krillians found new ways to hurt the weaker students without leaving marks that would show up in medical scans. They knew pressure points that could send waves of pain through a nervous system. They knew how to bend joints just enough to cause agony without breaking bones. They practiced these techniques on anyone smaller than themselves. Zeflin became their favorite target. The small Althari never gave up, never begged for mercy, never ran away. This made Thexral angry. He wanted to break the little alien's spirit, but nothing seemed to work. You are like a stubborn weed, Thexral told Zeflin one day, after cornering him in an equipment room. No matter how many times I cut you down, you grow back. Zeflin was on the floor, trying to breathe normally after Thexral had pressed on nerve points in his neck. The pain had been so bad that he had almost passed out. My people do not give up easily, Zeflin managed to say through gritted teeth. Then maybe I need to try harder. Thexral replied with an evil smile. The attacks started happening in places where the security cameras could not see clearly. Service corridors between classroom sections. Storage rooms where equipment was kept. Empty training rooms during meal times. The Krillians were careful to make sure no evidence would be found. Other students began to notice and worry. A young insect-like alien named Kliktar tried to help Zeflin one day when he found him hurt in a storage room. You should report this, Kliktar said, helping Zeflin stand up. This is not training, this is just cruelty. I tried reporting it, Zeflin said sadly. They do not care. They say it makes us stronger. Kliktar's bug-like eyes showed concern. Maybe we should stick together. Help each other. But the next day, Kliktar was found in a service corridor with 2 broken arms. When asked what happened, he said he fell down some stairs. Everyone knew he was lying. Everyone knew the Krillians had gotten to him too. Word spread quickly through the Academy's hidden communication networks. Students from peaceful species started requesting transfers to other schools. Some simply disappeared in the night, taking shuttle flights back to their home worlds. The dormitories that housed non-violent species became half-empty. The instructors saw this as proof that their methods worked. Only the strong would remain. Only those worthy of being warriors would graduate. Captain Mordeth, the Academy's head administrator, was pleased with these results. He was a massive Krillian, even bigger than Thexral. With scars covering his scales from decades of warfare, his office walls were decorated with weapons from enemies he had defeated. The weak are removing themselves, he told the other instructors during a staff meeting. This saves us the trouble of failing them later. Instructor Vorthok nodded in agreement. The galaxy is a dangerous place. Better they learn this now than die in real combat later. But Captain Mordeth did not know that someone was watching the Academy's student records very carefully. Transfer requests and sudden departures had been noticed by people who cared about such things. Medical reports showing suspicious injury patterns had been flagged by computer systems designed to spot abuse. The breaking point came during a zero-gravity combat exercise. All students had to practice fighting while floating in special chambers filled with thick liquid instead of air. It was meant to prepare them for combat in space. Zephlin was paired against Thexral for the exercise. This was not an accident. Instructor Vorthok had arranged it, claiming it would be good training for both of them. In the liquid-filled chamber, both fighters wore special masks that let them breathe. The thick liquid slowed down all movements, making the fight look like a slow-motion dance, but it also made escape almost impossible if something went wrong. Thexral attacked immediately, using his greater size and strength to overpower the smaller alien. His bone spikes cut through the thick liquid as he reached for Zephlin's breathing mask. The fight was supposed to stop if anyone's breathing equipment was damaged. But Thexral made it look like an accident when his claws tore through the tubes that brought air to Zephlin's mask. Suddenly, Zephlin could not breathe. The thick liquid around them was not meant for breathing. It would fill his lungs and drown him in seconds. He tried to signal for help, waving his arms frantically. Thexral saw Zephelin's panic and smiled behind his own breathing mask. Instead of helping or letting the small alien reach the surface, he grabbed Zephlin and held him down deeper in the liquid. Through the transparent walls of the training chamber, other students watched in horror. Some banged on the walls, trying to get the instructor's attention. But the instructors were talking among themselves and not paying close attention. Zephelin's movements became weaker as his lungs ran out of air. The thick liquid around him started to turn slightly blue as his body released chemicals in distress. His eyes began to close. Finally, one of the watching students broke protocol and hit the emergency stop button. Alarms started blaring throughout the training facility. Automatic systems drained the liquid from the chamber, and medical robots rushed in. The medical robots found Zephlin unconscious, his blue skin now almost gray from lack of oxygen. They quickly moved him to the medical bay and began emergency treatment. Brain scans showed small areas of damage from being without air too long. Thexral climbed out of the chamber acting confused and worried. His breathing equipment failed. He told the instructors. I tried to help him reach the surface, but the liquid was too thick to move quickly. Instructor Vorthok filed a report calling it a training accident. Equipment failure. No one was to blame. These things happened in dangerous exercises. But later that night, in the quiet of the medical bay, Zephlin whispered to one of the medical robots. He did it on purpose. He held me down. The medical robot recorded this statement as required by its programming. The report was filed in the Academy's computer systems and automatically sent to several databases for review. One of those databases belonged to the Terran Federation's Educational Oversight Committee. A computer program designed to spot patterns of abuse flagged the report immediately. 3 days later, a small civilian transport ship requested permission to dock at Kepler Station. The passenger manifest listed one person, Dr. Sarah Chen, educational consultant. Captain Mordeth's assistant approved the docking request without much thought. Civilian consultants visited the Academy sometimes to study their training methods. Most of them were soft academics who wrote boring reports and left after a few days. But Dr. Chen was different, though no one at the Academy knew this yet. Her official records showed a doctorate in alien psychology and experience consulting at military schools. What the records did not mention was her 20 years as a Special Forces soldier, or her current job training the most dangerous military units in human space. As her small ship docked with the station, Dr. Chen reviewed the files one more time. Student injury reports. Transfer requests from peaceful species. Medical records showing patterns that looked more like systematic abuse than training accidents. She closed the files and checked her gear. She would need to be very careful here. Too much attention too quickly would just make the perpetrators hide better. She needed to see the situation with her own eyes first. The Academy was about to receive a visitor unlike any they had ever seen. The transport shuttle's engines made almost no sound as it connected with Kepler Station. From the outside, it looked like any other small civilian ship. Nothing about it suggested it carried someone who would change everything at the Academy. Dr. Sarah Chen stepped off the shuttle, wearing simple dark clothes and comfortable walking boots. She carried one small bag and moved with the easy confidence of someone who had traveled to many worlds. At first glance, she seemed completely ordinary. She was 42 years old, with short brown hair that was turning gray at the sides. Smile lines around her eyes suggested someone who laughed often. She stood just 5.5 feet tall, shorter than most Academy cadets, and much shorter than any Krillian. But people who looked more carefully might notice other things. The way her eyes automatically checked exits and corners when she entered a new room, how she moved through crowds without ever bumping into anyone or being caught off guard, the way she could stand perfectly still for long periods, like a hunter waiting for prey. The Academy's front desk clerk barely looked up when Dr. Chen arrived to register. Civilian visitors came and went regularly. Most were researchers studying military training methods or officials checking safety procedures. Purpose of visit? The clerk asked, typing on his computer without looking at her. Educational consultant, Dr. Chen replied politely. I'm here to observe your training programs and write a report on interspecies learning methods. The clerk handed her a temporary identification badge. You have clearance for classrooms and main training areas. No access to restricted sections or student dormitories. Your escort will be here shortly. Dr. Chen clipped the badge to her jacket and waited quietly. The lobby bustled with activity as cadets moved between classes. She watched them carefully, noting which species stuck together and which ones seemed isolated or nervous. Her escort arrived 15 minutes later. Lieutenant Gextar was a young Krillian instructor, with bright green scales and fewer scars than the senior faculty. He seemed friendly enough, though he clearly considered this babysitting duty beneath him. Dr. Chen, I am Lieutenant Gextar. I will show you around the Academy and answer your questions. Thank you, she replied with a warm smile. I'm looking forward to seeing your facilities. I've heard impressive things about your training programs. As they walked through the corridors, Lieutenant Gextar talked proudly about the Academy's history and achievements. Dr. Chen listened politely and asked simple questions that made her seem genuinely interested but not very knowledgeable about military matters. How do you handle students from different backgrounds? She asked. Some species are naturally more aggressive than others. That is true, the lieutenant agreed. We believe in learning through challenge. The strong teach the weak by example. It is the natural way. Dr. Chen nodded as if this made perfect sense to her. But her enhanced hearing picked up sounds from a training room they passed. Sounds of struggle and pain that seemed one-sided. Her eyes briefly hardened, then returned to their pleasant expression. They entered the main training hall where dozens of cadets practiced various combat skills. Dr. Chen sat in the observation area and pulled out a small notebook, playing the part of a researcher taking notes. But her real attention focused on the social dynamics playing out below. She identified the main groups quickly. The Krillians dominated the best training spots and equipment. Smaller species practiced in corners or waited for scraps of time when the popular areas were empty. She watched Thexral and his friends for several minutes. Their body language spoke of predators who owned this territory, the way other students avoided eye contact with them, how they moved through the training area like sharks expecting everything else to get out of their way. Then she saw Zeflin. The small Althari was practicing alone near the far wall. Still recovering from his recent injuries, his movements were careful and precise, but she could see he favored his left side where ribs were still healing. Who is the Althari student? Dr. Chen asked casually. Cadet Zeflin, Lieutenant Gextar replied. He has had some difficulty adapting to our training intensity. Several medical incidents. Cadet, 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 cadet. Several medical incidents. Medical incidents? Training accidents. Combat practice can be dangerous, especially for cadets from peaceful worlds. They are not used to real physical challenge. Dr. Chen made a note in her book, still playing her role. But her mind was cataloging everything she observed. The instructor's dismissive tone. When discussing student injuries, the obvious fear many students showed toward the Krillian group, the way medical incidents seemed to happen repeatedly to the same vulnerable students. Over the next 2 days, Dr. Chen attended various classes and training sessions. She always sat quietly in the back, taking notes and asking innocent questions. The instructors grew comfortable with her presence. She seemed harmless enough. Just another soft academic studying their superior methods. But Dr. Chen was gathering intelligence with the skill of someone trained in hostile environments. She memorized patrol schedules and security camera locations. She noted which instructors were present during suspicious incidents and which ones conveniently looked the other way. During mealtimes, she sat alone and listened to conversations at nearby tables. Her enhanced hearing let her pick up whispered discussions about which students to avoid and which areas of the station were dangerous after dark. She also began to understand the Academy's unofficial hierarchy. Captain Mordeath ruled through fear and intimidation. Instructor Vorthok enforced a philosophy that might makes right. Younger instructors like Lieutenant Gextar followed their example, believing this was how warriors were supposed to behave. On her second evening, Dr. Chen visited the medical bay to review injury statistics for her supposed research. The medical staff was happy to help, proud of their efficiency in treating training accidents. But Dr. Chen's trained eye saw patterns they missed. Broken bones that suggested targeted attacks rather than random accidents. Nerve damage consistent with torture techniques used by certain military units. Psychological trauma symptoms in students from peaceful species. Quite a high injury rate, she commented mildly to the head medical officer. Combat training is dangerous, the officer replied. But we prepare these students for real war. Better they learn to handle pain here than die in actual battle. Dr. Chen nodded and made more notes. But that night, alone in her guest quarters, she contacted her superiors using an encrypted communication device hidden in her luggage. The situation is worse than reported, she told them. Systematic abuse disguised as training. Multiple species being targeted. Local authority figures either participating or willfully ignoring the problem. The voice on the other end was crisp and professional. Recommendations? Direct intervention required. But it needs to look natural. Too heavy-handed and they'll just hide better until we leave. Understood. You have authorization to proceed as you see fit. Try not to start an interstellar incident. Dr. Chen smiled grimly as she ended the communication. Starting incidents was not her specialty. Ending them was. She spent one more day in careful observation, waiting for the right moment. It came during the weekly full-contact training demonstration, when all students and instructors gathered to watch advanced combat exercises. Dr. Chen checked her appearance in the mirror before heading to the arena. Simple civilian clothes, practical boots, unremarkable jacket. She looked exactly like what she was supposed to be. A harmless academic observer. But underneath the ordinary exterior, she began to let something else show through. 20 years of Special Forces training. Experience in the galaxy's most dangerous conflicts. The absolute confidence of someone who had faced down warlords and walked away victorious. It was time for the Academy to meet the real Dr. Sarah Chen. The main combat arena filled with excitement as cadets and instructors gathered for the weekly demonstration matches. 300 beings from dozens of species packed the circular seating area around the central fighting ring. This was the Academy's most popular event, where advanced students showed their skills in full-contact combat. Dr. Chen sat in the observation deck with other visitors and junior faculty. Her notebook was open and ready, maintaining her cover as an educational researcher, but her attention was completely focused on the arena floor where something ugly was about to happen. Thexral stood in the center of the ring, his bone spikes extended in a display of dominance. He was bigger and more scarred than when Dr. Chen had first seen him. Success had made him bolder. Around him, his pack of Krillian friends watched from the edge of the ring like hunters waiting for a kill. Today's demonstration will show proper aggression techniques, announced Instructor Vorthak over the arena speakers. Cadet Thexral will demonstrate advanced combat methods against a volunteer opponent. The word volunteer was a lie, and everyone knew it. Zephlin had been forced into this demonstration through a series of threats and manipulations. The small Althari stood on the opposite side of the ring, looking tiny compared to his massive opponent. Zephlin's blue skin was still marked with fading bruises from previous encounters. His left arm moved stiffly where it had been broken weeks earlier. But his eyes showed no fear, only determination. He had learned that showing fear only made things worse. "Begin," Instructor Vorthak commanded. The fight was brutal and one-sided from the first second. Thexral moved with practiced cruelty, landing precise strikes that caused maximum pain without ending the fight quickly. He wanted to put on a show for the audience, to demonstrate his complete dominance over the weaker species. Each blow echoed through the arena with sickening impact. Thexral's bone spikes raked across Zephlin's ribs, opening shallow cuts that bled freely. His massive fists struck nerve clusters that sent waves of agony through the small alien's body. Notice how Cadet Thexral controls the pace of combat. Instructor Vorthak provided commentary for the watching students. He does not rush to finish his opponent. He demonstrates superior technique through measured aggression. Dr. Chen watched without moving, her face showing nothing of what she felt inside. Around her, some cadets looked excited by the violence. Others seemed uncomfortable but afraid to look away. A few were clearly enjoying Zephlin's suffering. The beating continued for several minutes. Thexral toyed with his opponent like a cat playing with injured prey. He would knock Zephlin down, then step back to let him struggle to his feet before attacking again. Each time, the Althari got up a little slower. Excellent demonstration of endurance training. Captain Mordeth added his own commentary from the VIP section. Pain tolerance is essential for military effectiveness, but Dr. Chen could see this was not about training. This was systematic torture disguised as education. Thexral was enjoying every moment of Zephlin's agony. The instructors were encouraging behavior that went far beyond necessary military conditioning. The crowd gasped as Thexral grabbed Zeplin's left arm and began to apply pressure to the joint. The small alien's arm had been broken before in the same place. Now Thexral was deliberately targeting the old injury, trying to break it again. Zeplin's face went white with pain, but he still refused to submit. His legs trembled as he fought to stay standing. Blood from his other wounds dripped onto the arena floor. "Submit," Thexral commanded loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Say you give up, little fish, and I will stop hurting you." Even through his agony, Zephlin shook his head. "No," he whispered through gritted teeth. This refusal to surrender seemed to enrage Thexral. He applied more pressure to the injured arm. The bone began to bend in a way that bones should not bend. Several cadets in the audience looked away, unable to watch what was about to happen. Then, Zephlin's arm broke with a sound like a dry branch snapping. The small alien cried out in pain and fell to his knees, cradling his shattered limb. But even then, even with tears streaming down his blue face, he looked up at Thexral, with defiance still burning in his eyes. "Stupid fish," Thexral snarled. He raised his foot to stomp on Zephlin's head, planning to finish the demonstration with a blow that might cause permanent brain damage. That was when Dr. Chen stood up. Her movement was smooth and quiet. But somehow every eye in the arena turned toward her. The small human woman walked down the steps from the observation deck, with deliberate calm. Her footsteps echoed in the suddenly silent arena like drumbeats. "Excuse me," she said politely, her voice carrying perfectly in the acoustically designed space. "I'd like to observe from a closer position for my research." Thexral paused with his foot still raised above Zeplin's head. He turned toward the approaching human with irritation and contempt. What was this soft little creature doing interrupting his moment of triumph? "Human," he growled, his voice full of menace. "This is not your concern. Return to your seat, or I will." He stopped speaking as Dr. Chen made eye contact with him. For exactly 3 seconds, she let him see what she really was. The careful mask of civilian politeness fell away completely. In its place was something that made every primitive survival instinct in Thexral's brain scream warnings he had no words for. This was not a soft academic from a peaceful species. This was a predator. This was someone who had walked through battlefields where entire armies had died. Someone who had looked into the eyes of war criminals and terrorists without flinching. Someone who had survived an environment so hostile they would liquefy most living beings in seconds. Behind those calm brown eyes was the absolute confidence of a killer who had never lost a fight that mattered. Dr. Chen had faced down alien warlords, survived in the vacuum of space, and earned the respect of the galaxy's most dangerous military units. She was not impressed by bone spikes or intimidation displays from oversized reptiles. For those 3 seconds, Thexral saw the real hierarchy of the universe. He saw his place in it, and realized how very far down the food chain he actually was. His bone spikes retracted involuntarily. His intimidating posture collapsed as his body's autonomic systems recognized a threat level far beyond his ability to handle. Ancient instincts that had kept his species alive for millions of years demanded immediate submission to this apex predator. Thexral took a step backward, then another. His yellow eyes, which had been full of cruel confidence moments before, now showed something alien to his nature: fear. Throughout the arena, other beings felt the change in atmosphere. Conversations stopped. Some cadets found themselves holding their breath. Even the instructors felt a primitive chill run down their spines, though they did not understand why. "Thank you," Dr. Chen said pleasantly, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. The mask of ordinary civilian politeness returned to her face as she knelt beside the injured Zeppelin. Her movements became gentle as she examined his broken arm with the practiced efficiency of someone trained in battlefield medicine. "This needs immediate medical attention," she said calmly. "Someone please call the medical staff." Around the arena, 300 beings sat in stunned silence. They had just witnessed something that challenged everything they thought they knew about humans and the Galactic Order. The small, harmless-looking woman had somehow reduced the Academy's most feared bully to a trembling wreck, with nothing more than a look. Thexral stood frozen in place, his mind trying to process what had just happened. For the first time in his life, he understood what true fear felt like. And he understood that humans were far more dangerous than anyone had realized. Within 6 hours of the arena incident, communication arrays throughout Kepler Station blazed with emergency transmissions. Priority messages flooded government networks on dozens of worlds, as news of the human terror response spread like wildfire through official channels. The Krillian High Command received a detailed report from Captain Mordeth within the first hour. His message was marked with the highest urgency codes and requested immediate guidance. The captain, who had never shown fear of anything in 40 years of military service, used words like unprecedented threat assessment and fundamental recalculation of human capabilities. Similar reports arrived at the Althari Council, the Vexkari Collective, and every other major government with citizens at the Academy. All carried the same basic message: humans were far more dangerous than anyone had realized. And this danger could be triggered by threats to innocent beings under their protection. Dr. Chen spent the hours after the incident in the medical bay, helping treat Zephelin's injuries. She worked alongside the alien medical staff with calm efficiency, her battlefield medical training evident in every movement. But she also observed everything around her with the eyes of someone conducting a final assessment. The medical staff treated her with nervous respect now. Word of what had happened in the arena had spread quickly through the station. None of them fully understood what they had witnessed, but all of them recognized that something fundamental had changed. "His arm will heal completely, Doctor," Chen told Zeppelin as the medical robots finished setting the broken bone. "You may have some stiffness at first, but proper therapy will restore full function." Zeppelin looked at her with wonder in his large eyes. "Why did you help me? You do not know me. I am not even from your species." Dr. Chen smiled, and for the first time since arriving at the Academy, it was a completely genuine expression. "Because someone needed to help you, and I was in a position to do it. That is reason enough." Meanwhile, in the Academy's administrative offices, Captain Mordeth faced the worst crisis of his career. Emergency communications from government officials demanded immediate explanations. How had the training program deteriorated to the point where outside intervention was necessary? Why had multiple species filed formal complaints within hours of the incident? The Galactic Military Council announced an emergency investigation into systematic educational abuse at the Academy. Representatives from 17 different species were already en route to conduct interviews and examine records. Most damaging of all, enrollment applications from Terran Federation cadets had increased by 400% overnight. Everyone knew what that meant. Humans learned by example. If they thought the academy was an interesting place to send their young warriors, it would soon be filled with beings just as dangerous as Dr. Chen. Instructor Vorthok found himself summoned to an emergency meeting with the senior staff. The older Krillian had been confident in his methods for decades, but now doubt crept into his voice as he tried to explain the training philosophy. "We have always believed that strength teaches weakness through direct confrontation," he said. But the words sounded hollow even to him. "This prepares students for real combat conditions." "And how do you explain what happened in the arena?" Captain Mordeth demanded. "One human civilian reduced our strongest cadet to a state of complete submission without violence. How does this fit into your strength-based philosophy?" Vorthok had no answer. Everything he thought he knew about power and dominance had been shattered in 3 seconds by a woman who stood barely over 5 feet tall. Across the station, Thexral sat alone in his dormitory room, staring at the wall and trying to make sense of what he had experienced. His pack of followers had scattered after the arena incident, avoiding him like he carried some contagious disease. Other Krillian cadets whispered behind his back about how he had been broken by a human stare. But Thexral was not thinking about shame or reputation. He was thinking about the moment when he had looked into Dr. Chen's eyes and seen his own death reflected there. Not death from violence or combat, but something far worse. Complete irrelevance. She had looked at him like he was nothing more than a badly behaved child. And somehow, that was more terrifying than any threat. For the first time in his life, Thexral began to question everything he had been taught about strength and power. Perhaps there were forms of strength that had nothing to do with size or bone spikes. Perhaps true power came from protecting others rather than dominating them. The changes began immediately. Captain Mordeth called an emergency meeting of all Academy staff and announced sweeping reforms to the training program. New protocols emphasized collaborative learning over dominance displays. Medical oversight became mandatory for all combat exercises. The philosophy shifted from survival of the fittest to excellence through mutual support. Students noticed the changes within days. Instructors who had previously encouraged aggressive behavior suddenly preached restraint and respect. Training exercises were redesigned to build skills rather than establish pecking orders. The Academy's culture began to transform from a place of predation to one of genuine military education. Dr. Chen completed her official observation period with a glowing report about the Academy's remarkable adaptability and commitment to educational excellence. She submitted detailed recommendations for continued adaptability under 17 improvement, all written in the bland language of bureaucratic consultation. But her real message was delivered privately to Captain Mordeth on her last day at the station. "The Terran Federation takes a personal interest in the welfare of students from all species," she told him in a casual conversation that carried the weight of an official warning. "We believe that strong leaders protect those who cannot protect themselves. We hope the Academy shares this philosophy." Captain Mordeth understood perfectly. The galaxy's most dangerous species would be watching the Academy closely from now on. Any return to the old ways would bring consequences that his imagination could not fully grasp. Thexral made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. On the day Dr. Chen left the station, he approached Zephlin in the main corridor. The small Althari tensed, expecting another confrontation. Instead, Thexral did something no one had ever seen him do before. He bowed his head in a gesture of respect. "I was wrong," he said simply. "I thought strength meant making others fear you. I learned there are stronger ways to be strong." Created. Zephlin stared at him in amazement. "What changed your mind?" "I met someone who could have destroyed me without effort, but chose to help instead. This taught me more about real power than all my years of fighting." Dr. Chen's shuttle departed Kepler Station as quietly as it had arrived. From her seat, she could see the Academy's lights growing smaller as they pulled away. Her official mission was complete, but the real work would continue long after she was gone. 6 months later, she received a message from Zeppelin. The young Althari had graduated with honors and was serving as a junior officer aboard a multi-species exploration vessel. The message included a photo of the ship's bridge crew, 12 different species working together with obvious mutual respect and friendship. The message was brief. Thank you for showing us that strength protects rather than destroys. The changes you started continue to spread. Dr. Chen smiled as she filed the message with hundreds of others like it. Reports arrived regularly from across the galaxy, telling of military academies adopting the Kepler protocols. Bullying incidents had dropped by 90% in institutions that implemented the new training standards. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed humanity. The incident at Kepler Station had become legend, growing in the telling until humans were regarded as sleeping giants who would wake if innocent beings were threatened. This reputation served humanity well in diplomatic negotiations and conflict resolution. Other species thought twice before acting aggressively when humans were involved, not because they feared human weapons or military might, but because they feared what humans might become if their protective instincts were aroused. Dr. Chen returned to her regular duties, training elite military units throughout human space. But she also accepted more consulting positions at alien institutions, always maintaining her cover as a harmless educational specialist. Her presence alone was often enough to correct problematic situations. Academy administrators would receive word that Dr. Sarah Chen was coming to observe their programs, and suddenly training accidents would disappear, and student welfare would improve dramatically. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about humanity. They did not need to be the largest or strongest species to be the most dangerous. Sometimes they just needed to let others see who they really were when their friends were threatened. In the end, the greatest victory was not won through violence or intimidation, but through 3 seconds of absolute honesty about what humans would do to protect the innocent. It was a lesson the galaxy would not soon forget.